Good evening. The May 17th, 2021 virtual legislative meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Volkey.
Present.
Mr. Pruski.
Here.
Ms. Fiedler.
Present.
Ms. Rodvian.
Present.
Ms. Hare.
Present.
Ms. Pickard.
Present.
Ms. Lacey.
Present.
Ms. Bolair, our County Auditor.
Present.
Ms. Schuett, Legislative Counsel.
Present.
Madam Chair, everyone is in attendance.
Thank you. Please pause for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We pray to administer that which is just in all policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen. For the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the Open Meetings Act statement.
The Maryland Open Meetings Act is a state law that requires public meetings to be open to the public and to be held in places reasonably accessible to individuals who would like to attend these meetings. The virtual format of this meeting of the County Council is due to the COVID-19 pandemic and is necessary in light of the serious health risks associated with public gatherings. While a virtual meeting of this type was not envisioned by the Open Meetings Act, steps have been taken to ensure that this virtual meeting includes alternate accessibility features that the Open Meetings Act Compliance Board and the courts have reviewed and approved, such as having a call-in phone number that allows anyone with a telephone to call and listen to the meeting, broadcasting the meeting with video and audio on cable TV and on the web, allowing written comments from the public to be submitted and considered by the council ahead of time, and allowing the public to call in via Zoom and testify live. The public access provided by this technology makes this virtual meeting reasonably accessible to the public as required by the Open Meetings Act. In addition, this technology satisfies the rules of procedure of the County Council that apply to meetings, and they do not need to be waived in order for this virtual meeting to be held.
Thank you. We will now open our invitation to audience. Madam Secretary, do we have any comments or communications on any subject not included in the printed agenda received from members of the public?
Madam Chair, before we get to that part, may I please read the ethics statement?
You may. I did not intend to skip it for the record. I just scrolled past it, sorry.
Okay, thank you. The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those who wish to testify in any form review the general information on lobbying sheet located on the ethics website under forms and publications. If there are any questions about the lobbying requirements, please contact the Ethics Commission at 410-222-4413.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We will now open our invitation to audience. Do we have any comments or communications on any subject not included in the printed agenda received from members of the public?
Madam Chair, we did receive a letter in our Dropbox from the Odenton Historical Society, I believe it was. It was dated May 7th. It seems to be budget related, however, so I'm going to hold that for our budget public hearing.
Okay. We have one individual signed up to speak at this time. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. Please unmute yourself and begin by stating your name and address for the record. Kathy Rhodes.
Madam Chair, I don't see Ms. Rhodes in our attendee room, and the phone number that shows a call-in listener does not match for registration, so I believe it is fair to say that Ms. Rhodes has not joined the meeting.
Well, okay then. Then our invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda? Mr. Pruski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not on the agenda, but at this appropriate time, I'd like to be added to Bill 5121 as a sponsor, as a matter of public record. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution, or minutes constitutes the reading of the whole?
Councilman Pruski, so moved.
Is there a second?
Allison Picker, D2, second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of April 19th and May 3rd, 2021.
April 19th, 2021. The meeting was called to order by Chair Sarah Lacey at 6 p.m. Ms. Radvian gave the invocation and led the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held remotely via Zoom webinar, beginning with a roll call of all present. May 3rd, 2021. The meeting was called to order by Chair Sarah Lacey at 6 p.m. Ms. Lacey gave the invocation and led the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held remotely via Zoom webinar, beginning with a roll call of all present.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of April 19th and May 3rd, 2021?
Radvian, so moved.
Is there a second?
Heather, second.
Oh.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The minutes of April 19th and May 3rd, 2021 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 5121, an ordinance concerning Crofton Special Community Benefit District, approval of loan and assignment agreement. Bill number 5221, an emergency ordinance concerning current expense budget, fourth quarter fund transfer and supplementary appropriations. Bill number 5321, an emergency ordinance concerning current expense budget, Board of Education, supplementary appropriation and transfer of funds. Bill number 5421, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget, community benefit program, grants for council-managed districts.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any resolutions to be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 2721, resolution confirming the appointment of a member to serve on the Personnel Board for Anne Arundel County. Resolution number 2821, resolution approving the appointment of a Severn River Commission member.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Because those are both appointment resolutions, we will hear them at the end of the agenda this evening. Okay, we'll now do one of the budget things that we do just once every year. We will now hold a public hearing on the constant yield tax rate. And we have Mr. Trumbauer joining us. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the County Council. For the record, I am Chris Trumbauer, County Budget Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to kick off tonight's fiscal year 2022 constant yield property tax rate hearing. Section 2-205 of the property tax article of the Annotated Code of Maryland requires the State Department of Assessments and Taxation to certify to all taxing authorities a constant yield property tax rate, which will produce the same revenue in the coming year that was produced in the prior taxable year, exclusive of new construction. It should be noted that this is different from the voter-approved county property tax revenue cap, which requires that the amount of revenue collected from county property tax be the lesser of 4.5% or January's consumer price index, which was 1.4% this year, exclusive of new construction. State law further provides that if the taxing authority intends to establish a tax rate greater than the constant yield tax rate, it must advertise and hold a public hearing. An advertisement was placed by this county council in the local newspaper, which adheres to the procedures required by state law and was reviewed and approved by the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. Anne Arundel County's constant yield tax rates per $100 of taxable assessment for fiscal year 2022 are certified by the State Department of Assessments and Taxation as follows. 92.19 cents for the county, excluding Annapolis and Highland Beach, 55.06 cents for Annapolis, and 90.69 cents for Highland Beach. The fiscal year 2022 proposed budget decreases the real property tax rate from 93.4 cents to 93.3 cents per $100 of assessment for the county, excluding the city of Annapolis and Highland Beach. This rate is in accordance with the county property tax revenue cap and is 1.2% higher than the constant yield rate of 92.19 cents and will generate 8.2 million in additional property tax revenues above the constant yield amount. Additionally, the fiscal year 2022 county tax rate applicable to the city of Annapolis real property is similarly decreased from 56.0 cents to 55.9 cents per $100 of assessment in the proposed budget. The rate is 1.5% higher than the constant yield tax rate of 55.0 cents and will generate $0.5 million in additional property tax revenues above the constant yield amount. Finally, for Highland Beach, the fiscal year 2022 county real property tax rate has decreased from 90.4 cents to 90.3 cents per $100 of assessment in the proposed budget. This proposed rate is 0.24% less than the constant yield tax rate of 90.69 cents and will generate $1,262 less in property taxes than the constant yield amount. This public hearing has been scheduled in accordance with state law. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Trumbauer. The County Council will set the property tax rate for Anne Arundel County, the City of Annapolis, and the Town of Highland Beach at a meeting beginning at 9 a.m. on Monday, June 14th, 2021. The rate may exceed the constant yield tax rate. We will now open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public to be read into the record?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any submissions of written testimony.
Thank you. We do not have anyone signed up to speak on this topic. The public hearing is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 2821 as amended.
Bill number 2821, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, community meetings, recordings.
Thank you. Mr. Volke, you are the lead sponsor of this bill. You have the floor first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volke, District 3. We've discussed this bill previously a number of times. This bill's been amended. So just to reiterate quickly, this would require that as part of the county code, it would be a continuation of the current green notice practice that Office of Planning and Zoning has been using, requiring that a developer record a community meeting and then provide a copy of that recording to the Office of Planning and Zoning. So this would simply codify that. And we have clarified by way of the amendment that was put up at the last meeting that the recording can be audio or audio visual. So that would be at the discretion of the developer as to how they want to record it. But this would take away the ability of the developer simply to be the only one keeping minutes of the meeting. So I would ask for my colleagues' support. Thank you.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of the County Council. Pete Barron with the County Exec's Office. Joining me is our OPZ Director, Stephen Kai Ziegler, and from Office of Law, our County Attorney, Greg Swain. I have nothing further to add. I think Councilman Volke described the bill well. We've made comments in previous meetings. The administration, again, for the record, supports the bill.
Thank you. Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. I just had someone approach me since our last meeting regarding this bill and the responsibility is there a responsibility for whoever is holding the public community meeting to have attendees sign any sort of disclosure or document that they are participating in or they're being recorded. I said I would ask, so I'm asking.
Mr. Volke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volke, District 3. I'm certainly happy to hear Mr. Swain's thoughts on this as the county attorney, and even Ms. Schuett if she wants to chime in. But my understanding of the wiretap law is that it only applies if the Maryland wiretap law, I would add, it only applies if you are in a situation where you do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So, where you do have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So in this instance, the fact that it's a public meeting in a public forum in a community space, I believe that would not violate the Wiretap Act, but if Mr. Swain or Ms. Schuett want to weigh in, happy to hear another perspective.
Sure, Greg Swain, County Attorney. Well, there's 2 points. I think one is what you've identified, what Councilman Volke has identified, but secondly, the structure of the meeting is actually put forth in the county code, which of course is a public law available to anyone. And just by virtue of that as well, they'd be aware that they're being recorded.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions at this time? Seeing none, we will now open the public hearing on bill number 2821 as amended. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any submissions of testimony.
Nor do we have anyone signed up to speak on bill number 2821. The public hearing on bill number 2821 as amended is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 2821 as amended.
Bill number 2821, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, community meetings, recordings.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 2821 as amended.
Mr. Volke.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Nay.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Bill number 2821 as amended is passed.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 3121.
Bill number 3121, an ordinance concerning boards, commissions, and similar bodies, Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. Joining me at the virtual table is our Environmental Policy Director, Mr. Matt Johnston, our Deputy CAO for Land Use, Ms. Lori Rhodes, our Budget Officer, Mr. Trumbauer, our Department of Public Works Director, Mr. Chris Phipps. Also from Public Works, we have our Director of the Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration, Mr. Eric Michelson, and from Law, Ms. Lori Blair Klausmeyer, our Deputy County Attorney. We're excited to bring forward this bill to you tonight. In 2020, the General Assembly created or enabled local governments to create resilience authorities. The bill before you creates a resilience authority per state requirements. The administration views the creation of an authority as a multi-step process that will become a valuable tool to address the threat of climate change. Climate change has already had real undeniable impacts to Anne Arundel County residents and businesses, and experts from the scientific community, the state and federal government are warning that we should expect more and worse impacts in the future. Communities everywhere, but especially lower lying communities near existing floodplains and streams are already suffering from more severe rain events that cause stormwater flooding. These communities need large scale flood mitigation projects to deal with the impacts of these severe weather events. Along the shores of the Chesapeake Bay, rising sea levels are threatening thousands of businesses and residents. According to the Maryland State Highway Administration analysis, they estimate where future floods will occur. Over 4,000 residences in Shadyside will be at risk of flooding from a 100-year storm event by 2100 by the end of the century due to sea level rise. The same study estimated that 30% of the roads across the county will be unreachable in a similar flood by the same time frame by the end of the century because of rising waters both along the coast and further inland. The Department of Public Works has identified more than 200 million of road elevations and drainage repairs that are needed just to address current flooding issues. And they have applied for a FEMA grant to study what needs to be done to make our transportation infrastructure resilient in the face of future floods. This bill before you is a fiscally responsible approach to address major climate impacts that we know are coming and are increasing in frequency. This is a financing authority that will be able to leverage state, federal, private, and local funds to deliver projects that we would otherwise not be able to deliver. It will be able to work with communities, businesses, and governments to cut through red tape and finance and deliver flood barriers, building and road elevations, and storm infrastructure to mitigate flood risks. The administration included funding to hire a resilience authority director and create an office in the FY22 budget, which is before you now. In subsequent years, the board of members and the board of directors would submit funding requests that would be subject to review and approval by the county council. This is a critical point. This bill allows us to get started and do the full scale analysis of our needs, pursue federal and state and private funding, but does not obligate the county for future expenditures. The authority also cannot raise revenue absent council action. The bill before you will only set up the structure of the authority, and the budget will enable the new authority to identify strategies and needs to address the threat. This bill is the culmination of a multi-year effort across county government to assess what we know about our climate risks today and explore ways to mitigate the hazards described in the county's hazard mitigation report, which was approved by resolution by this council last year. With us tonight to answer more detailed questions about the authority and the bill before you are a few members of that multi-year effort, Mr. Johnston, Mr. Phipps, Mr. Michelson, Mr. Trumbauer, and then also at the table is Ms. Rhodes, our DCAO for land use, and as always, our Deputy County Attorney, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. I will note that we have a couple of amendments ready for you. They should have been shared coming from the administration to clarify some oversight provisions of the bill specifically related to the county auditor. Happy to discuss those at the appropriate time, and the administration stands by and ready to answer any questions this council may have.
Are there any questions at this time? Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Mr. Barron, thank you for that introduction. I know we've spoken about this a bit in the past, and I have two kind of overarching concerns with it. As a general premise, and I appreciate that you mentioned Shady Side, there are a number of areas in District 7, and I know countywide that are really at high risk for flooding. But I would like to understand a little bit more about this authority and specifically why it is we can't do already what you say you're trying to do with this authority. You mentioned leveraging private funds, and public-private partnerships are, I'm a big supporter of public-private partnerships. I think I've sent you some draft legislation that I'm planning on introducing about public-private partnerships. I know the county has used them in other instances. Why is it you say we can't currently leverage private funds to accomplish some of these projects that are necessary through the normal budgetary channels and procurement channels of the county?
Thank you for the question, Councilwoman. I'm going to ask, we also have Mr. Trumbauer, we also have Mr. Phipps, but I think I'm going to ask Mr. Johnston to take the first crack at that. And we'll probably pass the ball a few times to make sure we give you a well-rounded answer, because there are a lot of reasons why this approach will provide extra benefit to county residents and taxpayers.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Barron. For the record, Matt Johnston, Environmental Policy Director for Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman. Thanks, Councilwoman Hare, for the question. It's a good question. There are a couple of other funding funds out there that do work such as road infrastructure work or stream restoration work, but they don't do this detailed resiliency work that we need done. And we can't really rob Peter to pay Paul to get all of this work done. I think a couple of things that we found in our multi-year assessment, which Mr. Phipps and Mr. Michelson can discuss a little bit more, are over $200 million in projects for just to address road elevations and culverts and bridges to get out of the floodplain today. We're going to need additional funding, innovative solutions, and need to tear down some red tape to make all of that happen. And then the other thing that I would say is in terms of large scale community flood mitigation efforts, that is simply not what we are set up to fund right now. The stormwater fee, which Mr. Michelson, I'll ask you to go here in just a moment, is just to comply with the EPA and state mandated water quality efforts, not water quantity, not flooding. And that's really key. This is not something that we can currently do as currently established. And if I could, I'll hand it over to Chris Phipps to talk a little bit more about how unique this Resilience Authority would be and how it would help with a lot of that backlog of projects.
Good evening, Chris Phipps, Director of Public Works. Yeah, and I think it's a matter. It's a question of scope and scale and magnitude. For the county to stand up the resources to accomplish the kind of projects, very regional, large, comprehensive flood mitigation projects, would essentially take years to develop, and the resources to implement and deliver those projects would be extremely long in process. If versus having a dedicated authority whose whole mission is resiliency projects on a large scale. You know, it's kind of like if you think of the Maryland Stadium Authority that provides that sort of force multiplier, supplemental pipeline of capacity to deliver very large projects that are outside the normal scope of what we do here in our programs. So, just when I say resources, that's personnel, funding, capacity, permitting, all the necessary aspects of project delivery. This would be done on a much larger scale than what we're currently doing, very dedicated to specific resiliency regional projects.
Does anyone else from the administration want to chime in on the answer to that before I call on the next council member? Okay, Mr. Volke, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volke, District 3. So I don't know if anybody on the panel can answer this, but I'm having deja vu back to 2013 with the stormwater remediation fee, also known as the rain tax, and the way that that was set up and the way that it was pitched in terms of large stormwater projects and what the intent was there. Can anyone tell me how this resiliency authority differs from that in terms of the structure? I understand this is city and county together, but other than that, it seems like a very similar structure in terms of its sort of separate enterprise, individual bond funding, et cetera.
I'm going to ask, I'll start with our former councilman on the panel who was here during that time, Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Chris Trumbauer, Budget Officer. So Councilman Volke, I was actually, during my time on the council, I was the chair of the work group that set that up, as you probably know. And that was specific to find a way to meet the county's obligations for the MS4 permits, as well as the Chesapeake Bay cleanup requirements that the county had to do. So we were able, at that time, to put together a bipartisan coalition, to bring that bill forward. And I have to take a second of personal privilege and just remind you, I'm sure you realize this, but the county does not have a rain tax. You do not pay tax when it rains. That's an unfortunate misnomer, but it is a stormwater fee that's based on the amount of impervious surface on your property. So that was specifically for that scope. And as you've heard a little bit from our panel already, this resilience authority, I think, contemplates a much broader scope because climate resilience is more than just stormwater. So we do have an effective program that Mr. Michelson and his team lead to address that specific need. But what we're bringing before you today, I think, goes well beyond the scope of what the stormwater program was set up to do.
Ms. Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. In my early travels around my district, I was quickly educated on nuisance flooding in the Severn Clark Station Road area. Long standing flooding issues that date back decades, but that have been exacerbated through development and change in topography and such. Back about, I believe it's 2003, the county did a study of some kind about how to solve the problem, but it never got fixed. The drainage issues were never tackled in the CIP. We are now seeing that project brought forward in the CIP this year, and I'm very excited, and I'm sure the surrounding community is as well. We've had many opportunities, and I appreciate the time that y'all have taken to walk me through this this bill and this new authority. Can you take a minute to explain the difference between the stormwater remediation projects and water quality and the ones that don't fall that we're looking to fund, that you're looking to fund in the Resilience Authority? Because there are projects that don't qualify for the stormwater program that's already set up. And then I just wanted to tell everybody another story. About 10 years ago, my neighbor, who is a Anne Arundel County police officer, was engaged in a very dangerous water rescue off Burns Crossing Road in Old Mill, where very nuisance storm-related flooding swept an elderly couple in their car off the road. It was harrowing that they were able to rescue that couple. And these are the issues very much inland in District 2 that I believe y'all have educated me that the Resilience Authority is being proposed as a solution. So, but I think it's important not only for all of us, but for the public to understand the difference and why this authority is being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. That's a great question. I'm going to push it to Mr. Michelson, who knows this project or knows this program in and out. So, Mr. Michelson.
Thanks, Pete. This is Eric Michelson, Deputy Director of the Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration in Public Works. So the watershed protection and restoration fee that is levied on properties within the county can be used for some stormwater infrastructure maintenance. A significant piece of that goes to that effort each year and can be used to a certain extent on these flood control projects as well. And the Clark Station Road project that's in this year's capital budget is funded out of that program. But I think the reality is really, it's a question of scale. When the watershed protection and restoration fee was set up originally, as Mr. Trumbauer said, the goal was really to help the county meet its regulatory obligations from the state and the federal government, which ranged in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of the work that needed to be done. As Mr. Johnson has said, there's again, a similar amount of work that needs to be done, particularly just around road, changing road elevations and dealing with insufficient bridge crossings or culverts, the kind of situation that you described, Councilwoman Pickert, where folks have driven into floodwaters, is the driver for our highways department putting up warning signs and gates and barriers, on certain road crossings to prevent folks from driving into those situations when those roads overtop under big flooding events. And so I think the issue here is not necessarily that the stormwater fee can't be used at all for this kind of work, because we are trying to do some of this resilience work within the context of our program, but that the scale of the issues that the county is facing in terms of resilience and flooding, particularly with existing infrastructure, are so great that we really need to be looking at all the means at our disposal to be able to try to address these issues. And I think a big piece of that really is, again, trying to figure out how can we take advantage of state and federal or other outside funds to support this resilience work when there seems to be an increasing interest on the part of those entities to support it. And I think the Resilience Authority helps give us a tool to do that sort of thing.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Mr. Barron, in your initial introduction, you mentioned that the Resilience Authority can't raise revenue, but the enumerated powers of the Resilience Authority specifically say charge and collect fees for its services. And there is a paragraph in here that allows the Resilience Authority to create security for its bonds by corporate resolution of the Resilience Authority. So I'm hoping somebody can reconcile those, because they seem to me to be contradictory.
Mr. Barron?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And great question, Councilwoman Hare. I'm going to ask maybe Mr. Johnston to direct us to who can give a more detailed answer on exactly what the difference is between what I was referencing, like raising taxes, to the fees that a Resilience Authority might be able to charge.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Barron. Matt Johnson, Environmental Policy Director. I don't have a whole lot to add to what Mr. Barron was clarifying there. The clarifying language there is taxes or revenue that you would raise as seed money for these projects versus the charges on bonds and charges for services. Those are two entirely separate animals there in terms of raising fees versus raising revenues to actually do the projects. I'm not sure if our budget officer has anything to say about the difference between those two very large buckets.
Thank you. If I may, Chris Trummeyer, budget officer. So one of the distinctions to keep in mind is when we say fees for services, that could include, if the Resilience Authority were to receive grant funding, we would want to make sure that the authority, could charge an administrative fee to do the grant, or if at some point down the road, the authority is undertaking, some service, we would want to make sure that they could be appropriately compensated for that. So there's plenty of other models in state and county government that do that. I know Maryland Environmental Service, charges fees for what they do. I believe Workforce Development, or at least ACDS, charge fees for some of the work that they undertake. So that's what I'm thinking of when I hear your question, Council Member, that those fees for services would cover those types of arrangements.
Mr. Volke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volke, District 3. Mr. Trumbauer and others, since you all were here in 2013 and the federal requirements were in about stormwater remediation, do we have any of those same requirements as it pertains to this Resiliency Authority bill? Is there any federal regulation that we need to meet?
Chris Trummeyer, budget officer. A council member, not to my knowledge, although I think there's a general consensus that there will be obligations that the county will have to address what I think is a scientific consensus on the effects of the changing climate. But to my knowledge, there's no federal mandate requiring us to act. But the one thing that I will add is that by setting up a Resilience Authority like this, I believe that the county will be very well positioned and frankly to be a leader in being eligible for federal funding and other resources that are going to be available. And so while there isn't a requirement, I believe there will be a very strong financial advantage to having this entity set up.
Ms. Pickard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. I wanted to ask the administration about only one other county has taken up the enabling legislation. They've done it differently. I'm going to get my counties wrong. I believe it's Charles, but it might be Calvert. It's Charles. Okay. I read an article which I found really interesting because I was searching around trying to do my own homework on the concept of resilience authorities. And from the article that was written about Charles County, they actually received a nod from, I think it was Standards and Poor's in their bond rating because they had set up, they are moving in a different direction, but I wanted to know if y'all had looked at that as well, and how does this bill differ from what Charles County has set up?
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask Mr. Johnston to talk about this because I know he has looked at Charles County.
Sure, Mr. Johnson, Matt Johnson, Environmental Policy Director. So first off, I think that your question about how does this set us up from a bond rating perspective is a question that our budget officer should answer, Mr. Trumbauer. And then secondly, Ms. Lori Blair Klassmeyer did a lot of research into Charles County and how it differs. And Ms. Klassmeyer, you can correct me, but I believe that in Charles County, what they decided to do was actually house that director, that office, within their existing government structure. So they're setting up the authority, very similar legislation, quasi-governmental authority with a board of directors of experts in resiliency, environmental restoration, and finance, but they're setting up their director within an existing office in their government. Is that correct, Ms. Blair Klassmeyer? I believe that you are muted.
I hit it 3 times, sorry. Lori Blair Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. I'm not 100, I'm looking at it now. I mean, they are setting up an authority. I know at one time they wanted to do this totally internally, which would have not, they wouldn't have, the law itself contemplates the creation of an incorporated entity that is not part of the county. And it may be, I mean, even under the our law, the director would be, the director would be hired by the county, but I guess an employee of the Resilience Authority. So, so I'm not 100% sure that it's much different than our law.
Council member, I can answer your question about the bond rating agencies. Chris,
go ahead, Mr. Trumbauer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Trumbauer, Budget Officer. So, Councilwoman, we actually did, we sit annually on 2 calls with our bond rating agencies, with S&P and also with Moody's. And we did detail our climate resilience efforts to both of them, and they had a number of different questions. And I think one of them actually referenced our plans in their ratings report. But I can tell you that across the country, the bond rating agencies are getting more interested in municipality and counties' abilities to deal with the changing climate, because they view that as a risk and a liability, and counties or municipalities that have a plan to deal with that, the bond rating agencies believe that's sound fiscal policy. So you are correct that is an item of interest for them. I can vouch for that.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Since we're on Charles County, I just wanted to follow up on the fee portion of this, because their law actually has a provision that charging of any fees for services is subject to the approval of their Board of Commissioners. And that is noticeably absent from our law. And I'm wondering if someone could just address why we did it differently.
Mr. Barron.
I'm not familiar with that specific provision of the Charles County law, but I'll ask Mr. Johnston or maybe Mr. Trumbauer to try to tackle.
Sure, thanks, Matt Johnson, Environmental Policy Director. So The vast majority of our bill is directly taken from the state enabling legislation. And so provision by provision, it's kind of a question, Councilwoman Hare, is this direct language from the state enabling legislation, or is it something slightly different? So that exact question about the fees and the authority to charge the fees, Ms. Blair Klassmeyer, we can take a look at the Charles County bill. If you don't have the answer right in front of you, we can get back to you on that difference.
Is it Lori Blair Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney? Yes, that the charging and collecting fees for its services of power that is in the state law that was taken directly from the state law.
And just to point out, Charles County is a commission form of government. We are a charter form of government.
Mr. Pruski?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilman Pruski, District 4. As Mr. Trumbauer said earlier, the stormwater remediation fee really preceded me. But for the past couple of budgets, and of course we haven't had too much of it now because we've had a pandemic, but I can recall, I actually looked in my email today, 8 communities, some were in Severna Park, Glen Burnie, Shadyside. I know there was one in Odenton, and I believe another one in Linthicum that had stormwater issues. And one of the things they kept asking for is, what could the county do specifically to solve the problem? And I think about a community right now in my area, it's a newer issue, Two Rivers, that's dealing with a lot of stormwater issues. Obviously, it's still getting built, but there were things that are already built. So if the community decided to put in some funds, along with grant money and other things, this resiliency authority would help solve the problem. So I think when we talk about public-private partnerships, we're not only talking about working together, but solving both private matters that are benefit to the public. And I think we forget that. And that's another thing why we're doing here. In addition to the bonding, I know specifically when we talked about the PPI fund, there was a lot of debate about this. If many of you recall, you had the same questions, right? Why are we having a separate fund? Well, if you're a bond agency or someone looking to figure out where money sits and what those resources and monies are going for, you want to look for the direct impact on that agency and where it has and where bonds go. Because obviously if there's an investment put in or funding. So I think what was brought up earlier, that comment about the bond agencies looking at, well, why don't you just use your stormwater fund or other things? They want a specific source so they can not only track the money, but also if it's coming from federal, private, and so on. But Mr. Trumbauer, I just wanted to go back earlier. Do you recall, you probably got similar emails about communities reaching out. It happens every once in a while about these stormwater issues that kind of come up. So we have a history piece here about, this is something that's ongoing. And it's going to continue to get worse. But I do recall getting those emails. And again, I have a few of them here, but it's not going to go away. But I'll finish there. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think there was a question there. So I'm going to go to the next council member, Ms. Pickard.
Sorry, I passed.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Coming back to the first question I started with, which is sort of what is it we need this for that we can't do now? What I'm hearing, I think, is really that it's more of a staffing collaboration issue based on scale, not necessarily that we would somehow be prohibited from taking on any of these projects right now, but that the staff side of it, or the personnel to administer, identify, target, et cetera, is what's missing. The permitting, I think Mr. Phipps, you mentioned permitting. All of that to say, how is it that the administration views this resilience authority working long term? Because is it something that's then going to need their own staff of permitting officials? Are we anticipating a new other new, how many hires after this to make this work? What kind of cost in that sense? And is that all going to get housed under the Resilience Authority and funded by grants, or is it going to be housed under the county budget and funded by tax dollars? Help me understand kind of long-term, as opposed to just the seed money, how this works and what that cost is to the taxpayer.
Mr. Barron?
Yeah, it's a
Hang on one second. I just wanted to ask, Ms. Stewart, you were waving your flag, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to answer this question or I'll come back to you.
Please come back to me. I have my own question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Barron.
That's a great question, Councilwoman Hare, and I'm going to ask Mr. Trumbauer to maybe take the first crack at sort of a lot of long-term thinking needs to be done, and some of it has already begun.
Thank you, Chris Trumbauer, Budget Officer. So, Council Member, I think I took two kind of separate premises for your question. The first is, what are we gaining from this in terms of staff or capacity? And I think the most important thing that we're looking for is really the expertise. We don't have at the moment, people that are super plugged into the resilience finance world. We have an extraordinarily capable, awesome DPW director. We have a great environmental director. We have a lot of talent in county government, but we don't have someone that lives in that world. And what we're looking for in standing up this authority is to get an executive director that is able to start pulling things together, and then to get a board of directors together that is fluent in that finance world, to know where the grants are, to know where the private investments are, and really pull that together. So to me, it's a matter of the potential and having the ability to compete for those resources that we know are going to be out there. And the second part of your question, I think, had to do with the money. And as we said at the beginning, we're kind of seeding the authority with $500,000 of one-time general funding this year. But the intention is that the authority will get up to speed and generate its own revenue. And there's plenty of examples of how this has worked successfully in county government. Economic development does a lot of that. ACDS does a lot of that. And so that's why we're setting it up in this quasi-governmental model, so that entity and the expertise that will be associated with it can help bring in the operating resources to keep it going long term. And that's not to say that the county will never put in another penny, but certainly our expectation is that the seed money will get it up and running, and then it will start bringing in resources to operate going forward.
Ms. Schuett.
Thank you. Linda Schuett, Legislative Council. My question kind of relates to questions that were asked at the beginning of this, because this authority has the power to be involved in resilient infrastructure. And resilience infrastructure is defined as infrastructure that mitigates climate change, and that includes stormwater infrastructure. So does that mean that someone needs to make an expert conclusion as to whether a particular stormwater project falls within the climate change part of this, or whether it's part of the stormwater remediation?
Sure.
Mr. Johnston?
Thank you very much. Matt Johnston, Environmental Policy Director. No, I don't think that there's any conclusive determination there. If I could take a step back and answer the question that I think you're asking in a broader context about the kinds of projects that could be funded, I think that we've always thought about these kinds of projects in three different buckets. There are the community projects, where a community would come forward and say, we really need expertise and additional financing to do flood mitigation. We're not talking about water quality. We're not talking about rain gardens. We're talking about big time flood mitigation and shoreline restoration. Combine those two things to protect us against rising seas. That kind of work could be funded through community benefit tax district, and that as seed money. And then this resilience authority would run with that and go and get better green financing out there and deliver those projects. So that's a community project. The second bucket that I always think of is private-public partnership, where let's say that a developer or redeveloper was putting in a parking garage in Glen Burnie or Jessup, and in the bottom level of the parking garage wanted to go ahead and put in additional stormwater storage. And that stormwater storage, like you said, well, that's stormwater, but if you store enough, then it also combats flooding. It combats the larger storms, the 10-year storms, the 50, 100-year storms. And if you put in enough, then that would be a good project for this resilience authority. And the seed money there would come from a private entity. And then there's the third bucket, which we talked about at the beginning, that kind of $200 million of backlog in road elevations, drainage, things like that. That would be the kind of project where the Resilience Authority is going to come back to this council and say, here are the projects we'd like to do. We have everything lined up for these projects, the community and the private. We'd like to do a Clark Station Road project. Would you like to help finance that through the PPA, for seed money, through the PPI or somewhere else? So I'd like to think about these projects in 3 big bins. So it's not as simple, Ms. Schuett, as saying, do we let Eric Michelson say, is it WPRP stormwater or is it resilience stormwater? No, it's just going to be the communities will come forward, the private businesses will come forward, and the entity that can deliver it best will deliver it.
Ms. Schuett?
Madam Chair, a follow-up. So really there could be overlap between a project that is done through the stormwater remediation fee and projects that are undertaken through this resilience authority. So it's not really, I mean, flooding can occur for various reasons. It may or may not be a climate change issue. It could be related to all kinds of other things other than climate. So you, like a community project may have flooding and may have had it for years because of other things, the way roads were built or the amount of development that's come in or whatever it may be. So it sounds to me like there is the potential for overlap between the two. Is that accurate?
I think there's potential for benefit added between the two, for sure. And I'll hand it over to Eric Michelson if he wants to talk a little bit more about how projects are designed today, but how they could be designed and work with the Resilience Authority moving forward.
Eric Michelson, Deputy Director, Bureau of Watershed Protection and Restoration. I think, Ms. Schuett, I think the short answer to your question is yes, there could be overlap. Ms. Pickard asked a similar question, and as she mentioned, there is a project in this year's capital budget funded through the stormwater program that is largely addressed at flooding and resilience along the Clark Station Road corridor. But I think Mr. Johnston's point is critical, which is to say, again, the Resilience Authority presents an additional means to bring resources to primarily resilience-associated projects, and that there's always sort of a fine line in terms of how much of the stormwater fee can reasonably be dedicated to these primarily flooding associated efforts, like you say, whether it's regarding climate change or poor infrastructure design or whatever the source of that might be. It's sort of a balancing act. And I think the Resilience Authority becomes another tool in the toolbox for the county to be able to focus on these instances that are primarily flooding and conveyance associated, as opposed to water quality focus, which is where the lion's share of the effort is currently with regards to the watershed protection focused or funded, projects.
Thank you.
Ms. Fiedler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I just want to clarify because Mr. Johnston and Councilman Pruski mentioned community scenarios where there is flooding taking place. When we're talking about the authority of the authority, can we just clarify that private property to private property flooding situations, there's a variety of them that have come to our office where a house was built and it's upstream, or there's discharge that was created and built prior to current laws. This authority cannot do projects on private properties, correct? Just want to clarify.
Pete Barron, I'll let the lawyers speak, but I don't believe that's entirely accurate. They couldn't do it without the private property owner's permission and agreement and partnership. But if say two communities that share a stream decided to work together and the Resilience Authority looked at it and thought it was a good project, they could. but they're prohibited from, if you're getting at eminent domain, it prohibited from the use of eminent domain.
It looks like, I think that question was answered. Okay. I think Ms. Pickard and then Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allison Pickard, District 2. I just wanted to clarify something because I'm getting a little spun around. When we talk about scale, I know that it was Councilwoman Hare was asking, and the answer came to the expertise that the Resilience Authority would bring to the table. But with the $200+ million backlog, I was under the impression that the scale was also, our CIP is not going to allow us to make a dent in that backlog. And this was an opportunity to leverage through public-private federal grants. If you look up, by the way, if you look up federal grant dollars via FEMA, you could be reading all weekend long. I chose to skim, but you could be reading all weekend long about opportunities for FEMA grants for local jurisdictions are going to bear the brunt of the work to shore up these issues. And this, unless I'm confused, I thought the professional expertise is definitely needed, but for scale, we're also talking about leveraging private dollars, public dollars, and moving projects along faster than we could actually address in our regular CIP through our bonding authority. Did I miss the boat?
Mr. Barron, are we rowing together?
We are, you're right on the boat, Councilwoman Pickard. Mr. Trumbauer, maybe you want to expand on the Councilwoman's point?
Chris Trumbauer, Budget Officer. No, Councilwoman Pickard, you said it exactly right. I mean, the expertise would be to help bring in those resources to do those types of projects. So absolutely.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Councilwoman Pickard, I think we agree on the fact that there's this other, federal state grant funding that can be taken. My only question, and I think I understand it at this point based on this expertise idea, is that the county could be going after those dollars now. If we have the bandwidth within our county, we can go out. We don't need the Resilience Authority as an entity to be able to go after those dollars. We can do that now with public-private partnerships. It just sounds like what the administration is saying is that we don't currently have the expertise or the bandwidth to be able to go after those dollars. And I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't some legal reason why we were not able to chase that money now, and if it was, what that rationale was. So I think I understand everyone's point there, and I appreciate that. My question now is on this modification or termination. There's a part in the law that says that the Resilience Authority is not backed by the full faith and credit of the county. And I get that makes sense. But then on termination, it says that all obligations of the Resilience Authority shall be transferred to and assumed by the county. I am concerned about a situation where the Resilience Authority issues bonds and has obligations on those bonds and then is terminated. And then suddenly the county is left with a large backlog of obligations that this council has never approved. Can anyone address that?
Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an important question. I think our budget officer will take that first, and he might pass the ball around a little bit to some folks with some expertise on it.
Chris from our budget officer. Could you ask that again, Councilwoman? I want to make sure that I answer it correctly.
Sure. There's a part in here I had initially asked when I first spoke with, I believe, Mr. Johnston and Mr. Barron about this, that, how is this obligating the county in any way? And the answer is, hey, it's not, because there's this language in here that the county is not obligated by whatever bonds the Resilience Authority puts out, except for the fact that in part, let's see, what page is this on? It's page 3 under modification or termination. it has this section about on termination of the Resilience Authority. And then it says all obligations of the Resilience Authority shall be transferred to and assumed by the county and the city of Annapolis. And I guess, I mean, my concern is naturally the council's not having a say in the charges or the fees that are in here. They don't have a say in the bonds that are issued. The Resilience Authority is doing all of this as a quasi-governmental entity. And then if it's terminated, you know, which it can be, the council is then, or the county rather, is then obligated to assume all of the financial obligations that the Resilience Authority may have. And that's a concern.
Okay, thank you. Chris from our budget officer. So, my understanding is this part of our legislation came from the state enabling bill. And I believe Ms. Blair Klassmeyer could confirm that. But if you're asking specifically about, you know, about bonds or things like that, we'd probably need to consult with bond counsel and we could get you an answer, you know, for the next meeting. But I'll defer to Ms. Klassmeyer because I believe that she did look into this language as it relates to the state bill.
Yes, Lori Blair Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. So the termination would be by the local government, meaning county executive with approval of the county council. So there would be some say in the county would have some say, including county council, some say over whether it would be terminated. And then the requirement is that if it is terminated, that the county and the city of Annapolis would take the assets, and the county and the city of Annapolis would also take on the obligations of the authority. And the city of Annapolis would also have to consent to the termination.
Ms. Pickard.
So I know we're going around in circles, Allison Pickard, District 2, but currently within our capital improvement program, we do not have the capacity to tackle an additional $200 million worth of resilience infrastructure improvements. So by creating, I got to get this right in my head because this is important. By creating the Resilience Authority, we would be able to, as a local jurisdiction, tackle those outside of our capital improvement project by leveraging federal, state, private dollars to do the work more fiscally and practically efficient within the private sector. Am I clear? I got to get this right.
Chris from our budget officer. Yes, Councilwoman. I think what you are imagining, which is the same thing that I am imagining, is that there will be budget pages in a future year budget that detail a project, but the funding source is not listed as impact fees or general obligation bonds or something. It's listed as either state grant or miscellaneous or some other funding source. And there may, of course, be some county contribution to it. But yes, you are correct. If this county likes to continue building schools and firehouses and parks improvements, we do not have 200 million of extra authority sitting around to spend on new projects. And so that level of effort, these resilience projects in the administration's mind need to be done, are going to be necessary. And that's in part why we're asking you to set up this resilience authority to help us get those done without jeopardizing all the other needs that you see before you in the CIP every year. Is that what you're looking to get out of us? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry if we didn't answer that question more succinctly before, but.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I want to touch on a point that was noted after Councilwoman Hare's question. Why are we so closely linked with Annapolis? I obviously understand that they are in close proximity and Councilwoman Robian has overlap, but why do we not have only a county specific bill before us and the city of Annapolis could have their own bill with their own legislation. Why, and then to know that we are linked in the termination of a resilience authority in the future, if that were to happen, just want to understand why we are very closely linked with Annapolis.
Mr. Barron?
Well, first, Annapolis residents are Anne Arundel County residents. There are some technical reasons, and maybe Mr. Trumbauer can talk about it. The state enabling legislation did specifically envision joint authorities between government units. So we fit under the state authorization.
Chris from our budget officer, I'll add to that. Part of the reason, council member, is because the city of Annapolis undertook a very similar effort that we did on a pretty similar timeline. So they were looking at what to do about resilience. Theirs centered somewhat on their city dock renovation and their redoing of their private parking garage down there. But because they were looking into their own resilience issues, this county was looking at our resilience needs. There was a natural affinity there. And we also believe that why should there be two parallel efforts going on in what's basically the same geography? So instead of setting up two separate authorities and kind of competing for talent and competing for projects and resources, we thought it would make more sense to collaborate with our partners. And we thought that would also, frankly, be enticing to federal grant makers or private investors to see that two jurisdictions were working together to undertake a pretty massive task. So those are some of the practical reasons we decided to pursue this path.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Mr. Trumbauer, I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I really do also want to make sure I understand this. You mentioned pages in a budget book that would show a project that as the revenue source would include grant dollars or other private funding. Correct me if I'm wrong, we currently have the ability to do that. We may not have had the staff or the expertise to go out and chase those dollars, but we could have a project right now in the county budget book to be approved by this council that includes money from federal grants, state grants, private sources, whatever it may be, for us to review as part of the normal budgetary process like any other public-private partnership, right?
Chris Trumbauer, budget officer. Yes, Councilmember, we certainly could, but I will say that those examples I think are pretty few. And the best example I can think of as a comparison is actually a project that's not in the budget book, but it is conducted by a quasi-governmental agency, and that's the Severn Intergenerational Center, which is not a county project, but which is an ACDS project. That's we are contributing funding through our budget, but it's passed through funding that we got from the state. So that is a very important project to the county. It's being done by ACDS. And that's also a model. So it doesn't have to be a project that's in our budget book. There are a number of other projects I can think of that have big components from other funding sources. The Jug Bay Environmental Center is getting a federal grant. We're contemplating outside resources for the Brooklyn Park Teen Center. But those are few and far between, to be candid. And I think the hope is when we have an entity that's solely focused on these types of projects and the financing maneuvers that can fund them, that we will see more projects and they will get to Councilwoman Pickard's $200 million backlog that she was speaking to.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Ms. Fiedler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. Mr. Trumbauer, I just want to go back to my previous question. So just for the record, I do understand that residents of Annapolis are county residents. So I don't think that my question was answered. Would the authority be prohibited from doing anything in Annapolis?
Chris Trumbauer, budget officer, you're asking if this bill is ultimately passed, if we could do projects in the city?
if we just had Anne Arundel County in the language?
Well, Chris from our budget officer, I mean, I think that would be limiting because we could certainly foresee a project that transcended the city-county boundary line, right? I mean, there might be a project that had a city component and a county component. But if this was to be an Anne Arundel County only entity, then the city of Annapolis would surely set up their own separate entity. And then we would be back in a situation where I referenced before, where I think, I don't necessarily want to say that we'd be competing, but we'd have two simultaneous efforts that are so closely linked that I think we'd be missing out on a partnership opportunity, but also potentially on economies of scale. So that's certainly an outcome that could happen. There's nothing, to my knowledge, in the state legislation that prohibits us from joining with the city. But we saw many more advantages to a joint authority than disadvantages.
Mr. Volkey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volkey, District 3. I just want to clarify, make sure I understood what you said earlier. I think you said there's $500,000 in the budget this year as seed money for this project. Is that right?
Chris Rummeyer, budget officer, yes. In fiscal year 22, under the CAO's office, you will see $500,000 in one-time funding. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pickard?
I just thought I would, real quick, Allison Pickard, District 2, I would just sort of add to the Annapolis Anne Arundel County partnership. I totally understand why the bill is drafted as such, but it's not, to me, an easy comparison is talking about our public schools. The city of Annapolis doesn't have separate public schools. The county and our county budget funds the schools within the city of Annapolis. So to me, it's the same kind of concept, slightly different. Thanks.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. That actually just brought up in my mind a good point. What if the two jurisdictions disagree? What if there's a bylaws amendment proposed and one of the jurisdictions approves it and the other one doesn't? How is that handled under this legislation?
Mr. Barron?
Sounds like a question for Office of Law.
Lori Blair Klesmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. If there's anything that requires concurrence of the two jurisdictions and one does not agree, then it would not happen.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have a question at this time? Ms. Rodkin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Rodman, District 6. I thought I would just chime in here on since the joint aspect of the city of Annapolis and the county has, obviously been a topic of conversation. I just think it's important to remember how inextricably our fortunes are tethered together. Lots of Annapolitans work all over the county. Lots of people who live in other parts of the county work in Annapolis. A lot of the economic drivers are in Annapolis. This is absolutely an area where we should be cooperating and looking together. We want to, I would hope that the whole county would want to, take some protective care of, sea level issues that could impact the city of Annapolis, because that impacts the entire county and vice versa. So I hope this is something where, this is a positive collaboration, positive cooperation, and not something to be, as Mr. Trumbauer has said, to turn into an unintended competition, because I think we really need to be working together.
Okay, since I'm not seeing any flags at the moment, we will now open the public hearing on bill number 3121. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any testimony.
We do not have anyone signed up to speak on bill number 3121. The public hearing on bill number 3121 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 3121.
Bill number 3121, an ordinance concerning boards, commissions, and similar bodies, Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion before we go into amendments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Should be coming up on screen. Amendment number 1. This amendment adds that a grandchild of a member of the director or of the chief financial officer of the Resilience Authority may not have a financial interest in any project over which the Resilience Authority has jurisdiction or any power or authorization to act.
This is an administration amendment co-signed by Ms. Pickard. So Mr. Barron, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank, I believe it was the auditor, Madam Auditor, who pointed out this error, and want to thank Councilwoman Pickard for working with us. Pretty straightforward. Inadvertently, in the original draft, we left out grandchildren as in the conflict of interest provision. So this would help protect the integrity of the authority, and hope you will move the amendment.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, Councilman Persky.
And a second?
Second.
Rodvian second.
Okay, we'll take questions. I have a question, so I'll just throw it out there now. Sarah Lacey, District 1. What is the source of the legal requirement that we apparently had, failed to include originally? Is this just good accounting practice, or is this part of the state law, the enabling legislation?
I'm Pete Barron with the administration's. Good question. I know several other entities that are set up like this include grandchildren. Ms. Blair Klausmeyer maybe can speak to the state law. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I will say this is a best practice.
Yeah, Lori Blair, Klausmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. This comes from various provisions in county law, such as the Tipton Airport Authority and some other boards and commissions that have this. It's not a requirement of the state law.
Thank you both. I guess I will just add Sarah Lacey, District 1. Actually don't support this amendment. I understand the ethics, and I think it's sort of normative to include a grandchild, but what we're talking about is supposed to be a cutting edge resilience authority that will be affecting the lives of said grandchildren, and I think it's just too restrictive, so I'd leave it as it is. Ms. Pickard.
I just wanted to give a shout out to my staff member who seemed, as I co-sponsored 3 of these amendments, it's because she and I went through the bill, and she found, Ms. Etzel found some of the same issues, and we're kind of working on the same path as the admin. So I just, rather than duplicate efforts, I'm sponsoring these 3 amendments. Thanks.
Pete Barron, if I inadvertently left out credit for Ms. Etzel, full apologies.
Are there any other questions or comments on amendment number 1? Okay. Oh, hang on a sec. Okay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Mr. Volpe.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Ms. Lacey.
Nay.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 2.
Amendment number 2. This amendment adds a requirement for the Resilience Authority to submit audited financials annually and allows the Resilience Authority's books, accounts, and records to be examined by certain county and city officials.
Mr. Barron.
Searching for my mute button, apologies. Pete Barron with the administration. As the amendment says, this is just clarifying in our view to make it clear that the books of the authority are open to the auditor.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt Amendment 2, Allison Pickard.
Is there a second?
Rod Van second.
Thank you both. Are there any questions, remarks? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 2.
Mr. Volkey,
Aye.
Mr. Pruski,
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler,
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian,
Aye.
Ms. Hare,
Aye.
Ms. Pickard,
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 2 is adopted.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Before we proceed, I'm going to shorten everyone's evening a little bit. Based on the conversation this evening, I'm going to withdraw amendments 3 through 8 at this time, and we can proceed straight to amendment number 9.
Madam Secretary, when you're ready, please read amendment number 9.
Amendment number 9. This amendment adds that the County Council must approve the Resilience Authority's charging and collection of fees to support bond issuances.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I think this is fairly self-explanatory, but as I mentioned, one of my concerns is this charging of fees without approval by this body. I think as the final fiscal authority in the county, it's something we really need to consider that in this legislation. And so, if they do want to charge a fee, I think it should come before us and we should approve it by a resolution at least. So with that, I ask that you support the amendment.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt, Councilman Persky.
Is there a second?
Fiedler, second.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councilwoman Hare for sharing this amendment this morning for us and giving me a heads up over the weekend that something was being worked on. So the bill as drafted, it's our reading of the state law and this legislation that it would have operated in this way. We don't feel the amendment is necessary, but it definitely provides clarity, and if it helps reassure this body that the approval would require council action, we're happy to support.
Ms. Pickard?
I just want to understand this further. When we talk about the collection of fees, we're not talking about fees charged to taxpayers. We're talking about fees within the operation of the authority itself, like grant fees. Obviously, we would have oversight over any fees to the taxpayer, correct?
That is Pete Barron with the administration. That is our understanding, Councilwoman Pickard. And maybe if Ms. Blair Klausmeyer wants to speak a little bit to the issue of local government approval, as I think it's the term of art that's used in the state enabling legislation.
Sure. The state enabling legislation says subject to the approval of the local governing body. Under Charter Section 1014, that means the county executive with the confirmation or approval of the county council, and that can be by resolution. And I will also point out that the state enabling legislation prohibits taxation by the Resilience Authority. It has no authority to tax.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. My concern is that the legislation itself, which of course is to be voted on by this council and therefore potentially an approval by this council, enumerates the power that the authority can charge fees. And so without expressly saying that any individual fee, and it doesn't say whether it's going to be an internal fee for administering a grant or whether it might be some kind of a user fee that is assessed for any particular project. I think it's unclear, and I think it's important for us to really make it very clear that fees are not to be charged to any taxpayer, but no fee should be charged, period, without this council giving its express approval.
Ms. Pickard, or does anybody else have a question? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 9.
Mr. Volkey,
Aye.
Mr. Pruski,
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler,
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian,
Aye.
Ms. Hare,
Aye.
Ms. Pickard,
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 9 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, when you're ready, please read amendment number 10.
Amendment number 10. This amendment requires the County Council to approve the issuance and sale of bonds by the Resilience Authority and the Resilience Authority's corporate resolution describing each bond transaction.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Same concept with the issuance of the bonds. I mean, we do get the resolutions that come before us for the issuance of other bonds in the county. So it's very much the same, just making sure that we're setting eyes on financial obligations of the authority.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Fiedler, motion to adopt.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we have been looking at this for the last couple hours, we can't support this amendment as drafted. We're happy to work over the next 2 weeks now that the bill has been amended and will be coming back in 2 weeks to maybe drill down on exactly how to accomplish this. And if it is something that can be worked on, we are unsure exactly of the impact of what this would have to the operation of the Resilience Authority, and unsure if this is something that we could support down the road. So as of right now, the administration can't support this amendment, would ask the council to reject it. But I want to be clear that we aren't closing off the conversation with the maker of the amendment.
Any comments or questions? Ms. Rodvian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Rodvian, District 6. So maybe the Pete or Mr. Barron or the county attorney's office could clarify if these bonds were issued, who would be accountable for them?
And Pete Barron with the administration, struggling to find my mute button tonight. I'm going to ask Ms. Blair Klausmeyer to speak to this if I'm incorrect, but it would be the authority who would be responsible for the bonds.
Ms. Hare, do you wish for us to still vote on this, or now, or we could withdraw it?
Since it's already been moved and seconded, let's vote on it, and then I will continue to work with the administration in the event that it fails.
Well, as you wish, but you were the second and Ms. Fiedler was the first, so I thought you might, but okay, fine with me. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 10.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Ms. Lacy.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Amendment number 2 has been defeated. Amendment number 10, excuse me, has been defeated.
When you are ready, Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 11.
Amendment number 11. This amendment removes the ability of the Resilience Authority to create security for bonds.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. This, again, the intention with this one is that it should come before the council, so that if, any kind of security that they were looking to create would come here and have to be approved specifically. So it wouldn't be one of their enumerated powers, such that under the state law, they would have to come to the council for approval.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Hair, so moved.
Is there a second?
Fiedler, second.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Pete Barron with the administration. Echo the comments I made in amendment number 10, but also do think with this one, we would really like to speak to bond counsel to understand the impact of a proposal like this. So again, don't want to close down the conversation with the maker of the amendment, but at this time, ask the council reject this amendment.
Mr. Pruski?
Councilman Pruski, District 4. Councilwoman Hare, thank you again. You brought that earlier amendment, this one. But my understanding is, and again, I don't have the charter in front of me. I can look at it. I'm not even sure we need bond counsel. Mr. Volk, you like this, but I'm an attorney and I don't play one on TV. But my understanding, we are the fiscal final authority. So if there's any funds, whether it be taxes, fees, or bonds, the council ultimately has to approve that. So while the Resiliency Authority may be a separate entity, anything that's a pass-through would have to get approved, from that. So again, like the Resiliency Authority got a private grant, obviously would be on them and other pieces. Plus, we just did also pass an amendment allowing the auditor to review all records from that. So again, I understand maybe we need to get further clarification from bond counsel, but that's my understanding regardless of any bond money or authority, that the council through the budget process would ultimately have to approve anything that would come through. Thank you.
Ms. Hare?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Mr. Pruski, I agree that that's how it should be. My concern with this bill is that it essentially delegates that authority or abdicates that authority to the Resilience Authority by virtue of giving these enumerated powers to the authority. And so I have a big concern with the fact that we would not, the way this is drafted, we would not see those fees or we would not see those bonds without this specific language or deleting these enumerated powers. And so you've hit on exactly what my concern is with the bill. If there is a legal opinion that all of this will come to us regardless, I would certainly be interested in seeing that. But I think you've certainly hit the nail on the head with exactly what makes me nervous about this.
Ms. Blair-Klausmeyer?
Lori Blair-Klausmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. So these bonds will not be county bonds. They will be Resilience Authority bonds. They do not carry the full faith and credit of the county. One of the reasons to pursue this with bond counsel is to find out if you can even issue bonds that don't have security. I mean, that's really the question. I mean, would the authority even be able to issue bonds if there was no security? And if there was no security, would they, would anybody buy the bonds? Would anybody market the bonds or underwrite the bonds? So that's really the question that is going to bond counsel, because these would not be county bonds.
Does anyone else have a comment, question? Ms. Rodbian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Rodbian, District 6. This is probably for Ms. Blair-Klausmeyer again. I'm just trying to imagine what kind of security might the Resilience Authority have?
Okay, now that I've disposed of the cat for about a minute.
I love the cameos.
Lori Blair-Klausmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. The Resilience Authority has the ability to own property. It has, real and personal property. My guess is that that somehow the security would be tied to whatever the asset is for the infrastructure project. But again, I am not an expert in bond transactions. Mr. Henn does a really good job with that, and he could probably answer that question even better than me.
Ms. Pickard?
Thank you, Allison Pickard, District 2. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as this is part of the state enabling legislation, therefore we see it in the bill before us. So if the Resilience Authority couldn't provide the security and credit for a bond, they're not going to take on a bond. So, I mean, I don't know, and I would love to hear from bond counsel if like a multi-year FEMA grant is considered security enough or something like that. I don't know either. But if the Resiliency Authority can't secure the credit for a bond, they're not going to get a bond. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I just want to reiterate again, this amendment, by taking their ability to create the security out of their enumerated powers, doesn't mean that the authority can't do it. It means they can't do it without the council approval, because the state law would require council approval in the absence of an enumerated ability otherwise. So by removing this, we're going to be requiring that any security that is created by the Resilience Authority gets approved by this council. Not that there may be no security at all, but that this council gets a say in whether or not there's, you know, the real property that they're looking to use as security is actually something we want them to be able to use as security. That's all.
Sarah Lacey, District 1. I have a question for Ms. Blair Klassmeyer, actually, then. If we did not adopt this amendment, then the Resilience Authority would have its own power to create security for bonds, but it still would not have access to, as a security, the full faith and credit of Anne Arundel County, or I guess of the city of Annapolis. I'm assuming that that's also withheld. And so if for some reason the Resilience Authority wants to issue bonds for a project, has been unable to create security and access the bond market, couldn't they then come to us with a proposal where then we say, okay, for this project, we, the county, through the county council, are willing to pledge the full faith and credit of the county to back those bonds in just that instance? And then in that case, we would know what obligation we were taking on in case there were default or anything like that. Is that correct?
Lori Blair Klassmeyer, Deputy County Attorney. The first part is definitely correct. I know enough to know that I don't know the answer to the county pledging its full faith and credit for those bonds. My guess is no, and I think that can become a very complicated question because of debt limits of the county and those types of things. Again, that's something that would definitely need the bond counsel to answer.
Mr. Barron, how would the administration propose this coordinating with bond counsel? Can bond counsel be made available at our next meeting, or provide a memo, or what can we do here?
Great question. I'm not sure of the bond counsel's availability for the next meeting. What I can promise is that we received this amendment today. We huddled very quickly to identify, I think, as Ms. Blair Klassmeyer stated, to know enough what we didn't know. And so what I can pledge to you tonight is that we will get an answer, and whatever is appropriate, whether it's a memo or just an email, or if counsel's available and thinks it's appropriate, we will be in touch. But we have already formulated the question in our head, and first thing tomorrow morning we are going to be contacting bond counsel.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question or a comment on amendment number 11? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 11.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Nay.
Ms. Lacey, excuse me.
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Amendment number 11 has been defeated.
Okay, Madam Secretary, then I suppose I should say that bill number 3121 as amended will be back before us on some date that I don't know when is the next date. June? Is it June our next meeting?
Yeah, June the 7th, 2021 is our next
Okay, June the 7th. We'll all be back together then. Okay. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 5021.
Madam Chair, I'm very sorry to interrupt this moment. I did want to point out that we have a captioner this evening who may need a break right about now, because we've been going for about an hour and 45 minutes.
Well, let's certainly show courtesy to our live captioner. May I have a motion to recess for 15 minutes?
So
Rod
moved.
Van,
Is there a
Rod Van
second?
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The council is in recess until 8 o'clock. Madam Secretary, when you are ready, please call the roll.
Mr. Volkey,
Present.
Mr. Pruski,
Still here.
Ms. Fiedler,
Present.
Ms. Rodvian,
Present.
Ms. Hare,
Present.
Ms. Pickard,
Present.
Ms. Lacy,
Present.
Ms. Bolaire, our County Auditor,
Present.
Ms. Schuett, Legislative Counsel.
Still present.
Madam Chair, everyone is present.
Excellent. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 5021.
Bill number 5021, an emergency ordinance concerning proclamation of civil emergency in Anne Arundel County, termination.
Mr. Volkey, this is your bill. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volkey, District 3. I'm not going to belabor the point this evening because I think we'll have a robust discussion on this soon, although judging from the news coverage, it's possible that this may become a moot issue too. With that said, I have learned after introducing this bill that there are certain regulations pertaining to restaurants that are allowing them expanded outdoor seating. And if this emergency ordinance were to pass this evening, it's going to create some serious havoc for those restaurants, as those expanded outdoor seating options will end for them immediately. I don't want to see that happen. So I have actually drafted and worked with the Office of Law to come up with another bill that will be an uncodified bill that will be introduced on Thursday. That bill has been shared with the administration for their comment. So at this time, I would ask my colleagues to hold this bill, and we could take it up again on the June 7th meeting, which would be our next regularly scheduled council meeting, allowing enough time for the other bill to be introduced on Thursday night and then come in front of the council on that same evening so that we can handle both these things at the same time. Thank you.
Madam Secretary.
Ms. Pickard.
Mr. Volkey, is that an official motion to hold this bill until June 7th?
It is. Thank you for the clarification.
I will second that motion.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the motion to hold.
I'm so sorry, Madam Chair, but we need to go through some parts that have been advertised first. We have advertised a public hearing this evening. We have to open that, hold that. We have to go through those things. After we do that would be a more appropriate time for a motion to hold the vote.
Certainly. In that case, would the administration like to respond before we take questions and go to the public hearing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron with the administration. The fifth time, maybe the charm. To be clear, the administration has been very concerned about the issues around restaurants for several weeks now as well. On parallel tracks, we've been working on our own legislation. Saw Councilman Volkey's draft this morning. Haven't had a chance to fully compare notes to see if we are in the same place, if there needs to be an amendment to his, or if ours takes care of it, or if his encompasses everything that ours is working on. Happy to work forward with Councilman Volkey to address this. I think we all, in all seriousness, are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here and are excited to see some return to normalcy. But we need to be very careful to make sure that we, as Governor Hogan stated in his press conference on Friday, and as we've been very clear, we need to make sure that we are providing our businesses the appropriate runway to get back to normal. And we have been following the state's lead for many weeks now, as our numbers have improved and as the more and more residents have been getting vaccinated. We are very hopeful that we are at the light at the end of the tunnel and are looking forward to a return to normalcy. But we must be clear that some of the changes that have loosened restrictions, be they zoning rules, outdoor dining in a parking lot, what have you, are able to continue to allow these businesses to be to recover from the economic impact of the global pandemic. So we look forward to working on legislation to protect that, and are comfortable with the hold tonight, because if the council didn't hold this bill, we would have to be opposed because of the impact that this would have on our restaurants.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll now open the public hearing on Bill number 5021. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public?
No, Madam Chair, we did not receive any submissions of testimony.
Nor do we have anyone signed up to speak on Bill number 5021. The public hearing on Bill number 5021 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 5021.
Bill number 5021, an emergency ordinance concerning proclamation of civil emergency in Anne Arundel County, termination.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Volkey.
At this time, I'd renew my motion to hold this bill until our meeting on June the 7th. Thank you.
Allison Pickard, D2, I'll second that motion to hold until January 7th.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the motion to hold.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Nay.
6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. The motion to hold the vote on Bill number 5021 until June 7th has been adopted.
Thank you. Accordingly, Bill number 5021 will be heard on June 7th.
Voted. Sorry, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry?
Voted. We can't hear it. We just closed the public hearing.
Well, yes. Regular watchers of this program know exactly what I meant to say, clearly. All right, well then let's move on to the resolutions. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 2421.
Resolution number 2721, resolution confirming the appointment of a member to serve on the Personnel Board for Anne Arundel County.
Pardon me, Madam Secretary, did I say 27? I should have said 24. 2421.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I am certain that the resolution number this evening for this one is resolution 2721. I can just confirm that real quick here.
This is the resolution opposing the superconducting.
Oh, I'm sorry. You did say I'm sorry. I got a little bit confused here because I have resolution 2721 in my list ready to go. I'm sorry, there's some things missing from the packet here. Just bear with me one moment, please. Okay, my apologies. Resolution number 2421, resolution opposing the Baltimore, Washington superconducting Maglev project.
Thank you. As a reminder, the public hearing on resolution number 2421 was concluded at our meeting that began April 19th and went into the 20th. And then we held the vote on this resolution. As you all know, this is my resolution Sarah Lacey, District 1. This resolution grows out of an attempt to represent to the best of my abilities my constituents who live in and around Linthicum, Harmons, Hanover, and other areas that will be impacted by the construction and operation of the Baltimore Washington Rapid Rail superconducting magnetic levitating train. We talked about it a lot at the last meeting, and I know one of the people that we heard from at the last meeting was Wayne Rogers, who is the CEO of BWRR. He and his lobbyists and others have reached out to everyone on this council and placed heavy pressure on us to vote against this resolution. At the same time, community groups, including the Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit, and loosely organized groups, grassroots groups such as Stop This Train, have been reaching out to us and emailing us, and I don't know if they've been calling you or any of that, but they have been very vocal in their opposition to this project for many years. In addition, the city of Greenbelt, their council opposes the project. Their mayor reached out and sent us testimony. The project would go through Greenbelt and have impacts there that are unacceptable in several respects. And I believe the Prince George's County Council will be hearing a resolution similar to this one tomorrow night. The purpose of this resolution is to be able to send a message at an appropriate stage or point in time of decision making. The decisions will ultimately be made at the federal and the state level on whether or not this project goes forward. But one of the components in that process is the environmental impact statement, which is being conducted under the authority of the Federal Railroad Administration. And the BWRR project team had to submit a draft environmental impact statement to the FRA for review and approval. I'm under no illusion that this one resolution could stop this entire train project, but I feel it is extremely important that the residents around where this train will be going through, who themselves will not derive any benefit from this train, are heard and are heard by this council. And I sincerely believe that each one of my colleagues, if this project were going through your district, you would be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And I think that if you, at this point, perhaps you've spoken with BWRR or, other residents who oppose the project, and you've probably formed your view, given that we held the vote so that you all could have additional time to become familiar with the project and its projected impacts. You've probably formed your view, and I would just say to you that if you believe you're going to vote yes on this resolution, I thank you. If you are planning to vote no on this resolution, I urge you to reconsider. Perhaps you should abstain. If your concern is that the project, not enough details are known about the potential impacts of this project in Anne Arundel County, then you should abstain. If you are concerned that there may be, you like the project now, but you might change your mind later, you should abstain. And those are my comments. Either way, I will be sending something to the Federal Railroad Administration that's based on the text of this resolution, but I would be remiss in my duties as an elected representative if I didn't tell you that Linthicum especially wishes that the entire county would pay attention, because if this train were going through any of your districts, any of your towns, you would oppose it. And nowhere else in the county, Annapolis and Edgewater especially, gets any kind of benefit from this train. You're never going to use it, not unless it's built to New York. And maybe that'll happen in 30 years. So in the meantime, I think the best thing to do is what we local representatives can do is sometimes it's appropriate to be a NIMBY, and this is one of those few times. At this time, Mr. Barron, if the administration would like to offer any comments, you may.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate those comments and the discussions that you and I have had, as well as a number of members of the council. With me at the virtual table, I have Matt Johnston, our Environmental Policy Director, Lori Rhodes, our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use, from OPZ, our Director, Mr. Stephen Kai Ziegler, our Transportation Director, Ramond Robinson, from Department of Public Works, our Director, Chris Phipps, and our Deputy County Attorney, Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. As I noted in our previous meeting, although it was, I believe, after midnight, after a long meeting, so I'll reiterate some of the comments that the administration made. This is a statement of the County Council, so we do respect the ability of this body to speak, but we are opposed to this resolution. There are huge needs for transportation in the region. This country is way behind other industrial countries in transit infrastructure. A final decision, as Madam Chair noted, where to allocate our limited transportation dollars is done at a level way above the head of the County Council or the County Executive, for that matter. These are federal and state decisions. We can inform and provide feedback, but in the end, it is up to others. The county is in the middle of our review of the draft environmental impact statement that was referenced. This is the professional and technical review, and we are committed to making sure it is done thoroughly and appropriately. I believe the comments are due on May 24th, and we expect to make that deadline, and those comments can be shared with this council as we finalize, after they are finalized. So with that, happy to provide any additional context or technical expertise from the illustrious panel before you.
Are there any questions from the council? Cicadas? Wait a second, those are really loud. Okay. Anybody? Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Rodvian, District 6. So even though in the end I came out that I'm not going to support this resolution, I really appreciate the makers bringing this resolution forward, because it forced me to take a very serious look at the issues raised and have a lot of conversations. And like I said, just examine this a lot more thoroughly. And I ended up coming down on the side of not supporting it, but I think this was a really important topic to look at carefully. And this does not necessarily have to be the final say. If we learn more facts that, in my judgment, a future resolution that objected to this project is certainly not out of the question. But at this point, I feel comfortable not supporting the resolution. And so I at least thank the maker for basically inspiring a discussion about this topic.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question or comment? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 2421.
Mr. Volkey.
Nay.
Mr. Pruski.
Nay.
Ms. Fiedler.
Nay.
Ms. Rodvian.
Nay.
Ms. Hare.
Nay.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
2 in the affirmative, 5 in the negative. Resolution number 2421 has been defeated.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 2721.
I am prepared to read that particular title. Resolution number 2721, resolution confirming the appointment of a member to serve on the Personnel Board for Anne Arundel County.
Mr. Barron?
There's that pesky mute button again. Pete Barron with the county exec's office joining me, I believe, in her first appearance before the county council is our boards and commissions coordinator, Miss Megan Brown, and from Office of Law, Miss Blair Klausmeyer. This resolution appoints Beverly Swain Stanley to the Severn River Commission for a term. Wait, hold on. Sorry, I've got the wrong one in front of me. Now I've got it. Sorry, Ms. Swain Stanley has extensive experience in leading and managing personnel. She is the current president of the CEO of the Union Station Redevelopment Corporation, and we are appointing her to the Personnel Board for Anne Arundel County. She is a county resident and resides in District 7. Happy to answer any questions.
Welcome, Ms. Brown. Does anyone have any questions? It appears none. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 2021.
2721, right? Resolution 2721, sorry.
My goodness, 2721.
I think things are a little mixed up this evening. Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
And Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2721 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 2821.
Resolution number 2821, resolution approving the appointment of a Severn River Commission member.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sticking with me is Ms. Brown and Ms. Blair Klausmeyer. Resolution 2821 appoints Nina Fisher to the Severn River Commission for an initial term expiring 3 years from the date of appointment. Ms. Fisher is a passionate natural resources and wildlife advocate. Her appointment comes with the enthusiastic support of Mr. Burdick, the commission's current chair. Ms. Fisher does live within the watershed and resides in Council District 6 and has the best name for a river commission appointee. Hope you will move the bill and put Ms. Fisher on the commission. She'll make a fantastic addition.
Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Rodvian, District 6. I really just wanted to jump in and also give a shout out to Nina Fisher. To think that we could have someone of her caliber with her background and her education and extensive experience and service already to the county for free on a commission that's doing this important work is amazing. So I really hope that all my colleagues will support her. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Any questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 2821.
Mr. Volkey.
Aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2821 is adopted.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Brown. See you next time. Is there any other business to be brought before the County Council at this time? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Allison Pickard, so moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. The County Council is adjourned until Thursday, May 20th at 6 p.m. when we will meet in person at North County High School for the public hearing on the proposed FY22 budget. See you there.